with what the minister and my colleagues have said. But I just want to hone in a little bit more on this perception about crime. And perhaps to further say, we need to avoid exacerbating the notion that suggests that Africa in general, because this is where these things start, is a crime-infested continent. And such that at some points, people even treat any African country as, others can hardly differentiate between a country and Africa, and they just regard us as just the same thing. That is going to be very important. We do tackle crime head on whenever it happens, and in collaboration and in partnership with the law enforcement people and the industry.
Agreed. Unfortunately, we've just run out of time. Honourable Minister van Schalkwyk, MEC Mabuyekulu, MEC Kolisile, Minister Winder, thank you very much for your participation in this dialogue, and thank you to the audience for the interaction. Goodbye from HICA 2013.
Well, on Open Exchange, we're now crossing to West Africa in Cape Town, and over to Godfrey Mutizwa.
Absolutely fantastic. Good morning, David. Thank you very much indeed. We are indeed live from Cape Town, and it's been a hive of activity, as you can well imagine here. We've got the big hitters meeting in separate meetings, but also meeting with us. As you can see now, I'm joined on our set by Sim Chabalala, co-CEO of Standard Bank Group. Sim, good to catch up with you. I have to ask you though, how many deals have you done here? And I'd have loved to be a fly on the wall in meetings with the guys that you've been meeting. Who have you been seeing?
Godfrey, we've been seeing banks who in many instances are sometimes our competitors, but many times they are our clients.
What are you talking about?
We're talking about exploiting the opportunity on the African continent and how great that opportunity is. The second group of people we've been seeing is our clients, both multinationals who have interests on the African continent and indeed indigenous corporates who we service.
Yeah. What's been your sense of WEF 2013 so far? I know there's been two issues really heavily there. We've got the state visit from Nigeria by President Goodluck Jonathan, and then of course we've got the WEF gathering in itself. What's been your sense of the two events and what they mean potentially for businesses like yours going forward?
Godfrey, we stand on the promontory of a great and new era. A new era is upon us, and it is the African century, is my sense. There is a great deal of excitement, but that excitement is backed up by evidence and by facts. One, our continent contains 7 of the 10 fastest growing countries in the world.
True.
2, from a banker's perspective, finance and banking is deepening. It's projected, for example, that our assets and our liabilities as financial institutions will double or triple by 2020. And so the opportunities for banking penetration are huge and are exciting.
Yeah. Talk to me about what you're seeing at the Standard Bank level in terms of these trade flows. Are they beginning to pick up? And from which regions, Sim? Because we know the Chinese are active and you guys do have a deal with you have a partner in the Chinese. Is it just an Africa-Asia flow? What about Europe? Old Europe, may we call it? What about the US?
Here are the facts. Europe remains a major trading partner for the African continent and indeed for South Africa. About a third of our trade is with Europe. Trade with the United States also continues, and indeed trade with Latin America is burgeoning, particularly with Brazil.
Yeah.
Trade and investment, I might add, with China is also burgeoning as a consequence of their requirement for natural resources, and those natural resources are huge on the African continent. So I think the trends are illustrating the movement of capital, goods and people, and they're illustrating or showing the move from north to south and east to west.
Okay, so that's with
Sorry,
the rest
west
of
to
the
east.
West to east. Well, that's with the rest of the world. What about within Africa? Because the stats that are being presented here are startling. When people talk about intra-African trade, we're talking about 10%, 12%. Compare that with 60% for Asia, Europe, and sometimes North America as well.
Godfrey, I don't have to remind you that we as a continent have a tragic history of colonialism.
Yeah.
And so the things we produce are required by trading partners outside the African continent, which is minerals and natural resources. But the exciting thing is, and I heard our Minister of Trade and Industry, Dr. Davies, and indeed his Nigerian counterpart, speaking quite eloquently at the Nigeria-South Africa Business Summit, talking eloquently about the need to industrialize and the need for us to deepen our economies and the need for us to integrate and trade with one another. Hence the talk, for example, of the free trade area.
Yeah. From Standard Bank's perspective, what are you seeing? Are the numbers beginning to stack up in terms of trying to increase those trade flows between the countries within the African continent? I was talking to Dr. Carlos Lopez from the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa this morning, and he was talking about the fact that there aren't many statistics across the African continent, number one. Number two, they are setting up a regional tool that will measure regional integration, which I would suppose would be a boon for companies like yours.
Godfrey, I mentioned that Minister Davies at the Nigeria South Africa Business Forum, and indeed at previous forums, has been saying that a deep conversation is happening amongst the leaders of the African continent.
Yeah.
We are looking at having a free trade area constituting 26 countries, GDP of $1 trillion, 600 to 700 million people. You can imagine that if the authorities get that right, what that will mean for the movement, as I said, of goods, trade, of investment, of services, and of capital.
Yeah.
As that happens, it's a boon for us in financial services.
So what is Standard Bank doing in terms of trying to harness that? How are you positioning yourselves? I mean, we know that you've been front runners in terms of realizing the African opportunity, but how are you positioning yourself then for that potential spurt in growth, if you like, that's likely to come should we realize that free trade area?
Godfrey, since the 1980s, we have been meticulously building our operations outside South Africa. In 1992, by way of example, we bought ANZ Grindlays. We bought the Uganda Commercial Bank, we bought the Malawi Commercial Bank, and integrated them into this quintessentially African but international group of banks, and taking advantage then of the increasing and improving demographics and greater disposable income by African people, and the execution and the implementation of infrastructure projects, both of which are of great benefits to financial institutions.
I'm whispering now. Are there any more deals in the pipeline?
I think in due course people will see things happen, is all I could say to you.
Before I let you go, the 2-month cohabitation as co-CEO of Standard Bank, how has that been working?
It's been working fantastically, and it's been working as well as our partnership has been working since 2009.
Sim, I know you would say that. Sim Chabalala, co-CEO of Standard Bank, talking to us about the African opportunity, about Standard Bank, and about trying to get Africa to trade even more than it is with itself. David.
Godfrey, you thought if you whispered he might tell you something that he wouldn't tell anyone else, but he's obviously wise enough not to fall for that. Thanks to Godfrey. Now, business leaders and public sector dignitaries from the local and international hospitality industry meeting in Durban for the 7th Annual Hotel Investment Conference for Africa. And Alicia Seckham spoke with Carla De Silva, who's Regional Manager for Air Mauritius. Let's have a look.
Price is the biggest issue. I think it is really about developing a value proposition that offers value to the consumer. And again, looking at the segments and the markets that we serve. So from a tourism perspective, it's really what does the consumer want? And we all know that the cost of an airline ticket, with the taxes, with accommodation, it all escalates. So what can we do as the value chain to come up with a cost-effective value proposition where we all still gain, but ultimately we're encouraging the consumer to come to our region.
And in fact, we've had Mauritius come up with a plan that actually streamlines, gets everyone collaborating and aligned. So take us through that, because it's been labelled the Travel Smart program.
Correct. The Travel Smart program started in South Africa 2 years ago. And we've taken it from literally 18,000 coupons, as we called it, to today 286,000 coupons. So what we did is we had a major challenge with seasonality. So low season, you find people don't want to travel, but of course high season and shoulder period, there was a huge demand. So we sat down with government, with the airports, with the hoteliers, tour operators and the airlines collectively as one body, and we said, what can we all do as individual organizations to ultimately put a value proposition together that encourages more tourists to come into this country. And that is what we did. So we had subsidies from government for a period of time until we were sustainable. From an airline point of view, we said we're going to have the right rate and we're going to look at what it is that attracts people to this region. So it was more about kids fly free under the age of 12 and they stay free on the island. They have a subsidy from the government, and that became, when you travel smartly, travel low season when it's cooler and quiet in Mauritius, yet it's beautiful all year round.
Just how tough are those negotiations, though, between the various stakeholders, and how difficult is it to get buy-in?
Absolutely, very, very tough, very challenging, and it's about ongoing communication, and also it's about relationships and open communication. And I think it is really about transparency and coming to the party. So if we have one stakeholder who is not coming to the party, it's about really understanding the return on investment and say, this is what we're missing out on. Let's do it. Let's get together.
You've got this plan going now. Just what kind of impact has it had on Mauritius's tourism market as a whole? Because then that would provide some incentive for others to jump on this bandwagon.
Well, I can share with you that we've taken the organisation from 140 million in South Africa to 263 million today in South Africa and Southern Africa. So that shows you how successful the program has been, because collectively we're stronger if we work together. And in return, we've encouraged Mauritians and even other points where they fly via Mauritius to come to South Africa, such as India and China, to have a different value proposition. So we've actually encouraged Mauritians to say proximity to South Africa is close, and we've done a value proposition for students, for example, for the medical sector where they come and shop, and even MICE, which is a very big driver in regional countries, which is incentive and government travel.
Well, that was Alicia Seckham speaking with Carla De Silva, Regional Manager for Air Mauritius in Durban. That's it from us. Over to you, Awole. After the break.
All right, stand by, Dari.
Okay.
I can't hear you.
We can't hear you.
Welcome back. Let's move to markets in Zimbabwe. A quick check-in on how the Zim mining index fared for this day. Flat 74, just over those points. And then looking at the industrial index and what we saw for the day, also flat 204.74. Just looking at that, in fact, if we had that percentage change, it actually should have been around 0.5% on the mining index, 1.2%. But those percentages not coming through. But that being said, those numbers were correct, 204.74 on the industrial index. Let's get the latest on what we've seen from the Zim market so far this week. Arnold Lamini, stockbroker at Bank ABC, is our market watcher on that end. Arnold, thanks for joining us. So overall, you're looking at positive gains for the week and turnover up. I mean, what stood out for you this week when it came to market activity?
Samantha, I think this week what we've seen is totally quite an interesting scenario. I think we've seen a lot of buyers coming into the market, and the beauty about it is most of them are foreign buyers, and this since started to drive the prices up, mainly on the blue chips. And on the side of the sellers, we've started to see sellers also come out as their prices are actually actualized in terms of what levels they wanted. We've seen a lot of activity, I think, in terms of the percentage gains. I think for the week, in the turnover has gone up about 27%. And then in terms of the volumes that are also being traded, we've seen a greater jump of 30% in the volumes traded.
So certainly is encouraging signs if you look at activity on the markets overall. And what you are seeing is mining counters starting to get more demand coming through. I mean, the likes of Bindura was up 11%, Hwange 7% gain, and Rio Zim also gaining there around 4%. So how would you evaluate market sentiment towards mining counters right now, specifically from foreigners? Do you see increased appetite continuing to come through?
I think for the mining sector, the mining counter, besides the listings being just a few, I think in terms of it reflecting the true value of what's on the ground, it's still far away from giving a true. But for Bindura and Hwange, I think what has come in as a strong indicator for them is the fact that it's the information flow that's starting to come out. I think for Bindura, I think we're starting to see a lot of, they're using a lot of platforms. I think the company is now interacting a lot with investors and keeping the investors, besides them coming from a loss position, I think, and also from a care and maintenance position. I think it's the information that's starting to flow and keeping the investors acquainted with the turnaround. And also the discovery of the new JOC, which gives it more life, I think, in the mining company. I think that also has brought up the value, and there's more interest from the foreigners also to see how.
But I mean, Arnold, that being said, mining is a risky business. There's also a lot of cost factors to look at, power issues, wage issues. Do you think that any of these mining counters right now are a good investment for long-term investors?
I think in terms of valuation, the key risk, I think, for the mining companies mainly is the commodity prices in the world. I mean, the world prices, I think, for the commodities. That could trigger, I think, the change in their strategy, and also in terms of their achievement of their objectives. But otherwise, in terms of where they're coming from and the value that is there in terms of the resource, I think they should be able to cover all the costs.
Yeah. Let's just turn our attention to issues fiscal and issues where the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe is in fact trying to make up for gaps in the budget. I mean, do you see this, their offloading of assets like Astra Holdings as a way to plug the fiscal deficit, or is there more to it than that?
I think from the time the economy changed over to using the US dollar, I think it's been an issue of liquidity, and the Reserve Bank playing its role as the financier of last resort. So this position hasn't been restored yet, and I think the move by Reserve Bank is pretty much to restore its liquidity position and also to play that role within the banking sector.
Arnold, we'll leave it at that. Thanks so much for joining us today. Arnold Dlamini, stockbroker at Bank ABC. And of course, we're looking forward to Delta and Econet results out at the end of next week, and pretty much seen as the epicenter of the Zimbabwean market. So 2 important results released next week. In the meantime, let's move on to the markets in Mauritius. CEMDEX sitting up by 1/3%, 1,953 points. The banking front for the day, we had Mauritius Commercial Bank down slightly there, and State Bank sitting flat as it stands at around just over 103. And looking at those hotel stocks, New Mauritius Hotels, 78 rupees, it was up 2.3%. Lux Islands bounced by 1%, and then Sun Resorts also closing slightly stronger on the day. And a quick check-in on how those sugar stocks are faring. Omnicane rally there 1.3%, and ENL Land closing stronger by 1%. And the rupee trading at 30.9 against the dollar. Dollar coming through with a 0.5% gain this hour. Well, the Hotel Investment Conference Africa for 2013 was hosted in Durban this week, and Alicia Seckham caught up with John Mwanza, the Group Operations Director at African Sun. That's to discuss the political risk taken into account when embarking on hotel investments in Zimbabwe. Let's take a look.
In terms of risk, it's always something that you cannot ignore, because you don't want to operate in a vacuum, lest you miss the boat. So in terms of political risk, it's something that you need to know, look at and weigh the risk and say to yourself, will my business thrive here? If it will, then you carry on. But if it's a danger to operate in a certain place, no matter how lucrative it is, we also worry about our staff. We also worry about all those things. So yeah.
How do you manage that risk, though, and mitigate against it? I mean, what are you doing in Zimbabwe right now to safeguard your profitability at the end of the day?
Zimbabwe is a normal trading environment at the moment as we speak. Since dollarization, as business people, we've gone all out. We've looked, if you look at now, we've done major refurb in our hotels, where we've looked at our city hotels, rebranded, changed a lot of things, and we are steaming ahead with our refurbishment because we can see that the environment is workable.
With what target market in mind?
We've got the world at large. Victoria Falls is an international market where the rest of the world will be coming to see one of the 7 wonders of the world. Yeah. We've got the city hotels where diamond has recently been discovered in Zimbabwe, and everybody is flocking to do business and clinch deals there. We are, in terms of the support that we have, Zimbabweans are known to be nice people, very friendly, and it makes it a whole lot easier to bring in that tourismness in them. Yeah. And average Zimbabwean would speak English. It's not difficult to then get and shine in the tourism
industry. Your footprint
industry.
extends beyond Zimbabwe, of course. You've got operations in Nigeria, in Ghana as well. What role do you see the group itself playing in the future development of the various cities in which you operate, especially on the continent? Because, you know, where you choose to set up shop, as you said, relies on infrastructure investment, for example. So one would say that it would warrant investment in that quarter from your side as well, not just from governments.
Okay. Yeah, we look, like we said, we work with governments and local authorities on that. But we come in as hoteliers. We operate hotels, and the one big thing that will make us successful or will make us fail is the people. Mm-hmm. So we have got a vehicle that we've set up, which is a mobile training vehicle, virtual training school, where we've got a team of various expertise within the various departments in a hotel that we take to all our investments. When we get there, we'll make sure that they get trained to cope with the standards and the operating procedures that we do within our brands. And also, we have got that support structure. Normally, we would set up shop. If you have got a certain number of hotels, would then set up a training arm that will continuously service the training. So the investment that we bring in is we go and we work with the local people and train them to the level that we operate.
Well, that's John Mwanza, Group Operations Director at African Sun. Now, it's the last day of the WEF Africa Conference, currently underway in Cape Town. Chris Bishop caught up with Amama Mbabazi, the Ugandan Prime Minister, on investing in Africa. Let's take a look.
Well, you see, the myth is that it's too risky to invest in Africa, and that's actually not profitable. Maybe if it was too risky, people would still come if there was profit. Now, all the evidence shows the contrary, because in Africa, first of all, if I can talk about profitability, the rate of return on investment in Africa is between 30 and 45%. And this is the highest anywhere in the world. You cannot get that rate of return on investment from any other region in the world. It is only in Africa.
Why is it so high, do you think, compared to the rest of the world?
Well, because it is profitable to invest in Africa. Because, you know, we have a lot of resources here. We have bottlenecks, okay, in terms of infrastructure and things like that. But once you overcome those, it's very profitable to invest in an African economy, generally. So that's one. Two, all the evidence again available. And this is World Bank report, this is consultancies like McKinsey of United Kingdom. The Economist in March carried a very comprehensive article on the performance of African economies over the last 10 or 20 years. The performance of the African economies has been consistent. They have registered an economic rate of growth of an average of 5%. Again, this is not comparable to another place in the world. In the last 10 years or so, the household income in Africa generally has increased by 30%. 30%. So all indicators are that actually it's profitable to invest in Africa, because if the wealth of our people has gone up, it means their purchasing power has gone up. So you don't only invest in Africa in order to sell to outer markets only, you also have a market in Africa. Now, of course, in the past, we had always had this problem of political instability, misgovernance, and things of the kind. Again, these are things of the past. When we are talking about Africa, of course, Africa is a continent, it's not a country. Many people talk about Africa, many people outside Africa speak of Africa as if it was one country. It is many countries. As we know, there are 54 states in Africa. But I am making a